With recent revelations about Nintendo's new piece of hardware, it is safe to say that the console is backwards compatible and it will feature the Nintendo Switch accounts, right? So there won't be any new system when we release this. Like your data will transfer over. And both of this is stuff we basically knew already. I believe the Nintendo Switch account thing is something I've talked about on this channel before. But looking at it like spelled out, from Furukawa talking about this is actually a really big deal going forward, right? Because this is going to be a situation in which a bunch of Nintendo Switch games that are coming out now or the past year or so are still going to continue to be relevant on Nintendo's new piece of hardware, right? Mario Wonder and Tears of the Kingdom are going to stay on store shelves. They're going to continue being sold, and people are going to buy them on the new Nintendo Switch in between new releases, right? There won't be any hard reset on Nintendo Switch Online stuff, so you will see all of the games that are available on there already continue to be updated as they have been, right? This is a big deal. This is huge. Like I do think people really got it in their heads that Tears of the Kingdom was some massive disaster and that Mario Wonder didn't do all that well, but I think people are going to be very surprised at what happens over the next several years. Because Tears of the Kingdom is a sequel to Breath of the Wild, right? When people are really wanting to go back to the world of Breath of the Wild, but don't want to do it because they've done everything else in the game, they are going to pick up Tears of the Kingdom. And I do think this is like the issue with Tears of the Kingdom in general is that like a good chunk of the audience never actually did everything in Breath of the Wild, right? You're talking about a game that takes like about over 100 hours to do everything in. So of course, the vast majority of people haven't like seen all the story content or know all the characters or even really want to go back to the setting again, right? Like Tears of the Kingdom is a game tailor-made for hardcore fans of Breath of the Wild, right? It is an expansion, a sequel to something we've already seen before, right? Tears of the Kingdom excels at being a new take on Breath of the Wild setting and really introducing pushing forward all these storylines and all these characters and introducing all these cool elements. But you really have to be a hardcore fan of Breath of the Wild to appreciate it. And Breath of the Wild is now the most famous game of all time, right? It's one of the best games ever made. It really demonstrates just why games like Cyberpunk 2077 and Grand Theft Auto 6 and The Elder Scrolls 6, Starfield, Baldur's Gate 3, those things, none of those games will even come close. Like we are going to see the Witcher 1 remake come out in 2027 or whatever and be less impressive than Breath of the Wild was in 2017, right? This is the power gap that the rest of the industry is going to have to settle before they do anything else. Like they have to play catch up to what Nintendo is doing. And they're really not even close. Not just with Zelda, mind you, but with Zelda, it's most obvious, right? With Breath of the Wild, they were able to put out a direct sequel in 6 years. Meanwhile, Witcher 3 doesn't have a there isn't going to be a sequel for probably another several years, right? They're remaking the original, but that's going to be lame. There's going to be a Witcher 4, but that's going to be lame, right? Like, what can they possibly do to compete with Zelda? And the answer is not much, right? We saw this with Dragon Age, we saw this with Baldur's Gate 3, we saw this with like Elden Ring, right? Nothing really even came close to what Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have managed to accomplish. And with that being said, that also extends to Mario Wonder and Fire Emblem Engage and Princess Peach Showtime, like all these other like major Nintendo Switch games over the past year, like Echoes of Wisdom, Mario and Luigi Brothership, right? These are games that might go overlooked for quite some time. These are games that people might not check out right away. They might not buy day one or year five or like on the 10th anniversary, but a lot of people are. And it's not just going to be those games. They're going to be buying remakes of 30-year-old N64 games, right? They're going to be paying for The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD, right? They're going to be paying for Twilight Princess HD and Wind Waker HD, Sunshine. They're going to be paying for Star Fox Adventures HD, right? They're going to be buying all these new games that haven't even been announced yet, right? Nintendo is in a situation where they are going to dominate the next generation of consoles. It's really not even close. It's not even really who's even the competition, right? Like this is the thing that really gets me about like the current state of the gaming industry because like everyone always says that like nobody's going to buy a Switch. Nobody cares. They have a Switch already, but simply releasing an upgrade to the same thing is going to result in a huge success for Nintendo. So the old stuff is going to do well, and the new stuff is going to do well, right? There's nothing you can possibly do to downplay what Nintendo is doing. Like all you're doing is making yourselves look like idiots. Like every time this comes out. Like if you seriously think that Mario Wonder bombed, you're completely delusional, right? A simple look at sales charts will demonstrate that Fire Emblem Engage was still ludicrously popular, right? You can see how popular Princess Peach Showtime was, and these games are going to gradually grow their audience over time. Mario and Luigi Brothership, I think, is going to be a title that not only does well this holiday season, but continues to be enjoyed by people who buy the next piece of Nintendo hardware, right? The backwards compatibility is going to keep the original Switch lineup very, very relevant to the point where I don't think we'll stop seeing Switch games sold for probably 2 or 3 years after launch, right? It's going to be a while before they start phasing all that out. And to me, this indicates just how healthy of an ecosystem Nintendo Switch is actually in right now. It shows that Nintendo is in a position where they can perpetually just upgrade their hardware with the Nintendo account system, tying it to your existing purchases, and allowing you to keep playing your old games forever. And I think that's going to be a big deal, not only because they offer the best service, but because Nintendo simply has the best back catalog of games in the industry, right? It's crazy the sheer amount of kids today who still play the original Super Mario Bros., right? People who grew up playing The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, people who played Pikmin 1, people who played Splatoon, which is now almost a decade old, right? You can see just how much better Nintendo is than their competitors simply by looking at their game lineup. And the thing that's changing recently is that more and more, this is no longer a stigmatized thing to openly say. Back in the day, people like me would be harassed by everyone, right? Because of me speaking the truth about how Nintendo was better than Halo, was better than Xbox, was better than PlayStation, was better than God of War, Final Fantasy X, Kingdom Hearts, like all of that stuff, right? Gears of War, right? All of that stuff has like fallen by the wayside years ago, and yet Nintendo is still going strong. How exactly can you justify that? Especially with the recent foray into other industries, with the Alarmo thing and Nintendo Switch Online thing. Like, how exactly is Nintendo Switch 2 supposed to fail in next year? Like, how exactly is it supposed to happen? Because it's not going to sell as well as the original Switch. It's still going to do well, right? Like, it's still going to be a phenomenon. It's still going to have a lot of great games. Like, even in that hypothetical scenario, it doesn't do as well, right? Nintendo has the Nintendo Online subscription. They are constantly getting money from their audience, and they'll just do something else. They'll release another piece of hardware. There's really nothing you can do to stop Nintendo's momentum at this point. And we're at the point now where certain individuals really can't admit it, right? PC gaming cannot compete with Nintendo because they don't have high enough quality software, right? What exactly are PC gamers playing other than pirated versions of 20-year-old Nintendo games, right? What is Xbox and PlayStation are going to do? Both of them have gone third party to PC and are slowly phasing out their hardware because they're losing a bunch of money and can't stay competitive, right? What exactly is iOS going to do? Right? Like you look at the top earning iOS games and you either see like low effort gacha waifu trash or you see a Nintendo product, right? The Pokemon TCG is doing incredibly well on iOS, right? When you look at that, you realize that there's nothing iOS can do to keep people away from Nintendo's branding, right? The narrative from 20 years ago that, well, 15 years ago, the narrative from back in the day that iOS would that the iPhone would make Nintendo completely obsolete, it was a completely bunk theory because people still use other hardware other than their smartphone. It doesn't matter if the phone can play games. Nintendo can do it better. It doesn't matter if the phone can have an alarm clock. Alarmo does it better, right? There are things that Nintendo can do that iPhones can't. And that is why people are always going to pick up hardware like it, right? They are going to keep buying new cars. They are going to keep buying new Nintendo hardware. They are going to keep buying Kindles and tablets and stuff like that. Like people aren't just going to sit there and scream about well, I have an iPhone for that. Like this isn't how this works, okay? And the past several years have demonstrated that very, very well, I think. If anything, considering the quality of iPhones with how quickly they break and stuff like that, it might not be impossible to see the brand fall off the next 10, 20 years. I say that the instant I see a viable competitor, I'm going to switch brands. Like I don't enjoy my iPhone. I think it's overpriced. Even though I use it all the time, I would gladly pay less for the same product if someone would provide it for me, right? But with that being said, um, who could possibly come in and steal Nintendo's thunder? Like, who exactly is going to produce something on the same level of quality as Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom? People love to shill this idea that Genshin Impact is some big thing, but it really isn't, right? When you look at the reality of the situation, when you look at what people actually respond to, the reality is quite a bit different than the artificial game journal narrative.